Imagine trying to build a business that relies completely, and I mean entirely, on the unpredictable weather for its raw materials.
Right, which is already a nightmare scenario for most supply chain managers.
Exactly. You are constantly watching the skies, tracking monsoon patterns. You're just hoping for that absolute perfect balance of rain and sun to grow your crops.
Yeah, your whole operation is literally stuck in the mud.
Right. It's subject to droughts, floods, just the total whims of nature. But, and here's the crazy part, imagine that same business, under the exact same corporate roof, sharing the exact same balance sheet, also builds highly precise high-speed gears.
Like industrial gears?
Not just industrial, gears that power the propulsion systems of massive naval ships.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So how in the world do those two completely different realities exist inside the same company? I mean, it sounds like a logistical impossibility, right? Or at least the setup to a really weird corporate joke.
It really does. I mean, on the surface, it seems completely contradictory.
Yeah.
Because on one hand, you have agriculture, which is, it's inherently messy, it's deeply cyclical, and completely at the mercy of Mother Nature.
Right.
And then, on the exact other hand, you have this high-end, mission-critical engineering.
Mm.
In that world, a tolerance error of like a fraction of a millimeter isn't just a lost crop.
Right. It's a disaster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a difference between mechanical success and a catastrophic failure for a warship.
Oh.
You don't usually see those two risk profiles living in the exact same house.
But that is the exact reality of the company we are taking a deep dive into today.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to unpack Triveni Engineering and Industries Limited, or just Triveni for short.
It's a fascinating conglomerate.
It really is. I mean, this is a company with roots dating all the way back to 1932. That is practically the dawn of modern Indian industrialization.
Yeah, it's a massive legacy.
And just to give you a sense of the scale we're dealing with here, they generated 5,689.2 crore rupees in revenue in the 2025 financial year.
Which is just a staggering amount of money.
It's huge. So we really want to understand how legacy industrial businesses in India aren't just surviving, but they are actually riding these massive macro policy waves, demographic shifts, and energy transitions to stay relevant nearly a century later.
And the stack of sources we are parsing through for this deep dive gives us a remarkably clear window into how they actually operate.
Yeah, what are we looking at today?
So we're looking at some very comprehensive business profiles, deeply detailed financial stock stories. These actually cover their performance all the way up to the third quarter of the 2026 financial year.
Oh, wow. So very recent data.
Very recent. And we also have some really rigorous competitive positioning analyses. And what emerges from all of this is a picture of a company that is just, it's constantly mutating.
Okay, let's unpack this, because looking at Triveni's portfolio is genuinely mind-boggling at first glance.
There's a lot to take in.
Right. On one side of the ledger, you have sugar and alcohol. But then on the exact opposite side, you have industrial steam turbines, high-speed gears, and municipal wastewater treatment plants.
Yeah, the wastewater thing always throws people off.
I mean, if you handed this portfolio to a modern venture capitalist today, they would probably have an absolute panic attack.
Oh, 100%.
It defies all modern logic, right? This whole idea of core competencies and niching down.
I completely understand why it looks chaotic to, a modern observer. Modern business theory tells you to do one thing and just do it better than anyone else.
Exactly.
But when you really dig into the mechanical and financial history of Triveni, it actually serves as a masterclass in how an organization can use incredibly steady, highly engineered products
To balance things out.
Exactly, to act as a structural counterweight to the wild, unavoidable cyclicality of agricultural commodities. This portfolio, it wasn't just thrown together by accident. It is a very deliberate, defensively constructed balancing act that they've built over decades.
A balancing act where one side of the scale is literal millions of tons of sugarcane.
Literally.
So let's start right there, right at the sweet but highly volatile core of their business. Triveni is actually the second largest sugar producer in all of India.
Which is saying something.
It is. And to put that into perspective for you, the total addressable market, the TAM for sugar in India, is massive. We're talking about roughly 35 to 38 million tons of sugar produced annually across the country.
Yeah, the scale is hard to wrap your head around.
In financial terms, that translates to a 2 to 3 lakh crore rupee market.
The sheer tonnage of material moving through the Indian agricultural supply chain is just staggering.
Right.
I mean, it requires a logistical footprint that is hard to fully conceptualize until you actually see it. You have these endless lines of tractors and trucks just lined up for miles outside these mills during harvest season.
But here's the part that made me stop and actually reread our source notes, because it goes against our typical understanding of, market dominance.
Right, the market share numbers.
Yeah. Despite being the #2 player in the entire country, Triveni only holds a 2 to 3% market share.
Yeah, it's wild.
I mean, the industry is so incredibly fragmented that 70 to 80% of the market is completely open. It's dominated by over 500 small, unorganized, often cooperative run mills.
Right.
So it's like this massive pie where even the biggest slice is just a tiny sliver.
That's exactly it.
So if you're the second biggest player in the game, but you only control 3% of the board, are you really a giant? Or are you just like the tallest person in a room full of toddlers?
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it, actually.
Because you certainly don't have the leverage to tell the room what to do.
No, you don't. You are technically a giant by comparison. But your ability to dictate terms, and particularly pricing terms, to the broader market is virtually zero.
Right.
And to understand why this market looks the way it does and why it completely resists consolidation, we really have to look at the structural realities of the geography. First, you have the demographics of the sugarcane belt itself, particularly in places like Uttar Pradesh in western India.
Right. Highly populated areas.
Extremely. You have steady population growth there, which sustains a massive intergenerational farmer base. Millions of individual family livelihoods are tied directly to this single crop.
Wow.
So you have millions of micro-suppliers feeding just a few hundred processing hubs.
And I guess when you have millions of independent farmers whose literal survival depends on a single harvest, the government naturally steps in to create some guardrails, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because the free market is simply too volatile for that level of social dependency.
Precisely. And so the regulatory environment in India is really the defining feature of the sugar business. Specifically, we're talking about the fair and remunerative price system.
The FRP, right?
Yes, the FRP.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, we are just looking at this objectively as a market mechanism. But what it is a legally mandated baseline price that these mills absolutely must pay farmers for their sugarcane.
Got it. So it's a strict pricing floor.
Exactly. It guarantees that the farmers receive a baseline income, regardless of whatever global fluctuations are happening in sugar prices, or if there's a local glut in supply.
So from a purely business analysis standpoint, this creates a pretty fascinating operational challenge for Triveni.
It's a massive challenge.
Right, because they don't get to negotiate their primary raw material cost based on, volume discounts or normal market dynamics. They are legally bound to this pricing floor.
Right. It acts as a hard, immovable boundary on their profit and loss statement.
Yeah.
You have this fixed, often rising minimum cost for your raw input. But then, the final price of the processed white sugar you sell, that is subject to the ruthless fluctuations of market demand.
Oh, man. So you're squeezed on both ends.
Exactly. You're dealing with seasonal gluts, international trade dynamics, you name it. And that creates an incredibly volatile margin environment.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, in a bad year, you are legally forced to buy cane at a high fixed price, and then you have to turn around and sell that sugar into a depressed, oversupplied market.
Which sounds like a recipe for bankruptcy if you aren't careful.
Which is exactly why a company like Triveni realizes very quickly that they cannot simply crush cane, make white sugar, and just stop there.
They have to do more.
Right. The margins are simply too fragile. They have to squeeze value out of every single byproduct of that plant.
And that perfectly brings us to the power cogeneration business, because this is where the engineering DNA really starts to peek through the agricultural dirt, so to speak.
Yeah, this is where the pivot happens.
So when you crush sugarcane to extract the juice, you are left with this massive amount of fibrous, woody residue. It's called bagasse.
Right.
Now, historically, I guess a lot of mills might have just treated this as waste.
Oh, absolutely. Just piles of trash.
But Triveni burns it. They take this bagasse and burn it in these high-pressure boilers to produce captive steam and electricity for their own mills. And then they actually sell whatever excess power they generate back to the regional grid.
It's just an incredibly elegant thermodynamic loop.
Yeah.
You are literally using the waste product of your raw material to power the very machines that are processing that raw material.
It's brilliant.
It is. And the total addressable market for this kind of sugar mill cogeneration in India is roughly 2,000 to 2,500 megawatts.
Okay, so a decent size.
But again, keeping with that theme of fragmentation we talked about earlier, Triveni only holds about a 1 to 2% share of that power market.
Really? Still so small.
Yeah, because their power generation is strictly constrained by their own sugar crushing capacity.
Oh, right.
If they don't crush cane, they don't get bagasse. And if they don't get bagasse, the power plants go dark.
Right. And I saw in the sources that a lot of those 500 plus smaller mills in the country severely underutilize their bagasse
They do, yeah.
because they simply don't have the capital to build those high efficiency steam boilers in the first place.
Exactly. The capex is too high for the little guys.
So you have this core business that is massive, but it's highly seasonal. The cane is harvested, it's crushed, the sugar is made, the bagasse is burned, but then the off-season hits.
Right, everything stops.
You have this massive factory infrastructure just sitting there idle for months, and you have these massive storage tanks filling up with molasses, which is, that thick, dark, viscous syrup left over from sugar extraction.
Yeah.
So what does a company do when they have all this molasses, this massive fixed cost infrastructure, and a really desperate need for stable year-round revenue?
Well, you take that byproduct and you ferment it. You build a distillery and you turn it into industrial alcohol.
Which is exactly what Triveni did. They basically pivoted from a sugar giant into an energy company.
They really did.
They are currently the second highest ethanol supplier in all of India, and the TAM for alcohol and ethanol is another massive pool, sitting at around 50,000 to 70,000 crore rupees.
It's a huge market.
But they aren't just selling alcohol to, beverage companies, right? They're actually tapping into the national fuel grid.
What's fascinating here is how Triveni is successfully latching on to a massive structural macroeconomic tailwind.
Yeah, the blending mandates.
Right. The Indian government has instituted these strict blending mandates, targeting a 20% ethanol blend in all motor fuel by the years 2025 to 2030.
And where are they at right now?
Currently, they are hovering around 15%. Now, just impartially looking at the policy, this is driven by two main factors.
Okay.
First, achieving greater domestic fuel security.
Right, relying less on imports.
Exactly. Reducing reliance on expensive crude oil imports.
Uh.
And second, providing a cleaner burning additive for the transportation sector.
So when the government essentially guarantees demand like that, by mandating that a fifth of all fuel consumed by this massive population must be ethanol, that creates an absolute gold rush, right?
Absolutely.
For any company capable of producing fuel-grade ethanol at scale, it completely transforms this volatile byproduct into a guaranteed cash cow.
It fundamentally de-risks the capital expenditure needed to build these plants in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
Because the demand is there by law. And Triveni has leaned heavily into this guaranteed demand. They recently commissioned this brand new state-of-the-art 200 KLPD, that's kiloliters per day distillery at a place called Rani Nangal.
Okay.
But the true strategic genius of this plant isn't just its massive throughput. It's not just big. It is the specific engineering architecture they chose to implement there.
Right. I noticed this in the technical readouts. They didn't just build a bigger molasses tank. They built a multi-feed distillery.
Yes, the multi-feed capability.
So if you think about it like a car, they didn't just put a bigger gas tank in. They built a hybrid engine that can actually take two completely different types of fuel.
And that multi-feed capability is a massive competitive advantage.
How so?
Well, historically, ethanol plants at sugar mills could only process sugarcane derivatives, like molasses.
Right.
But because of this new capability at Rani Nangal, Triveni is no longer entirely held hostage by the sugarcane crop.
Oh.
Yeah. So if sugarcane yields are low because of that bad monsoon, or, and this happens, if the government suddenly restricts the diversion of sugar juice to ethanol to ensure there's enough domestic sugar to keep grocery prices stable.
Right, because food security comes first.
Exactly. If that happens, Triveni doesn't have to just shut down the plant and eat the fixed costs.
What do?
They simply recalibrate the machinery, they adjust the enzymes, and they switch over to processing maize.
Grain-based ethanol.
Exactly.
So they completely decouple themselves from the sugarcane harvest cycle.
Entirely. This feedstock flexibility is just a superpower in a volatile commodity market.
I get.
It allows them to run the plant closer to 365 days a year, maximizing the return on that massive capital investment.
Wow.
In fact, this specific ability to pivot to maize was the key operational driver in an absolutely massive profitability surge they experienced recently.
Oh, right, the H1 FY26 numbers.
Yes. In the first half of the 2026 financial year, the improvements in their distillery operations, driven almost entirely by this raw material flexibility, boosted their profit before tax for that half of the year by a staggering 178%.
178%. That is incredible. They basically engineered an escape hatch from agricultural seasonality.
That's a great way to put it.
But, if you look at their recent moves, they aren't stopping at just supplying industrial fuel to massive oil companies.
No, they're getting much more ambitious.
Yeah, in July 2024, they took this huge leap forward into the FMCG space fast-moving consumer goods.
Right.
They launched their own Indian-made foreign liquor, or IMFL, brands in Uttar Pradesh. We're talking about a super premium whiskey brand called the Crafter's Stamp and a premium brand called Matsya.
So from a strategic standpoint, this is a textbook forward integration strategy.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning they are looking at their value chain and realizing they're currently sitting all the way at the bottom, just selling bulk liquid as a commodity.
Right.
They want to move up. They want to capture the massive profit margins associated with premium branded consumer products.
Because selling a bottle of premium whiskey is a lot more lucrative than selling a barrel of industrial ethanol.
Exactly. And the total addressable market for premium IFL in India is huge. It's roughly 50,000 to 70,000 crore rupees.
Wow.
And that's driven by a growing, upwardly mobile middle class that is increasingly interested in premium spirits.
Okay, but I have to push back here because this feels incredibly risky to me.
It definitely is.
I mean, isn't creating a super premium liquor brand from scratch a completely different skill set than running a massive, dusty sugarcane crushing facility?
Oh, it's a night and day.
Right. You're going from dealing with farmers, government procurement mandates, and bulk industrial logistics to trying to convince a young professional in a high-end bar in Lucknow to order the Crafter's Stamp over a globally recognized brand like Johnny Walker.
Yeah.
Or even a well-established Indian brand that requires slick marketing, lifestyle branding, and just a completely different type of corporate DNA.
You are absolutely right to be skeptical, and that is the critical risk factor in this move.
Yeah.
Because right now, Triveni's actual penetration in the IMFL market is statistically negligible. It's sitting at less than 1%.
Oh, wow. So they are barely a blip right now.
Barely a blip. This is an entirely execution-dependent bet. Moving from a B2B commodity supplier where you essentially compete purely on price and scale,
Right,
to a B2C brand builder, where you compete on perception and prestige. It requires deep expertise in consumer psychology, boutique distribution networks, high-end packaging.
which they don't historically have.
Right. It is a very long-term play, and success is far from guaranteed. They are essentially funding a high-stakes startup inside a 90-year-old industrial conglomerate.
It's definitely a space you have to keep an eye on if you're analyzing their future growth. But if sugar, maize, and alcohol represent the agricultural biological side of the house, how do we explain the other half of this company?
The heavy metal.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's take a mental walk across the corporate campus, leave the sticky molasses tanks and the grain silos behind, and step onto the heavy-duty factory floor of the power transmission and water sectors.
the contrast is jarring, honestly, but it is actually where the real margin strength of the company lies.
It really is. In their power transmission segment, Triveni is the undisputed market leader in India. They hold a dominant 20 to 30% market share in customized high-speed turbo gears.
Which is a highly specialized niche.
Very specialized. They manufacture industrial steam turbines up to 100 megawatts that are compliant with highly rigorous API 611 and 612 international standards. The TAM here is 10,000 to 15,000 crore rupees.
We should pause on those API standards for a moment because it really highlights the level of engineering we are talking about here.
Yeah, explain that because API sounds intense.
It is. API standards, which are set by the American Petroleum Institute, are essentially the global gold standard for mechanical integrity and safety.
Okay.
If a piece of rotating equipment like a steam turbine is API 611 or 612 compliant, it means it is engineered to operate flawlessly, continuously for years in some of the most punishing, high-stakes industrial environments on Earth.
Wow. Like what kind of environments?
We are talking about massive oil refineries, complex chemical processing plants, and remote offshore platforms.
Oh, I see.
If a turbine fails in those environments, it doesn't just halt production for a few hours. It causes catastrophic explosions.
Oh, wow. So the stakes are literally life and death.
Exactly. The metallurgical precision and the obsessive quality control required to meet those standards are immense. You don't just stumble into API compliance.
And their engineering footprint doesn't even stop at heavy industry. They are a top Indian provider of water solutions.
Yes.
They are treating roughly 12,000 million liters per day across more than 1,200 installations.
Of 1,200 installations.
Yeah. They are deeply involved in zero liquid discharge systems, which are becoming mandatory for many industrial plants, and these massive municipal initiatives like the Ganga Cleanup Project.
Right.
That's a 20,000 to 30,000 crore rupee market.
Right.
Oh, and just to cap it all off, they are an emerging critical supplier of propulsion systems and steam turbines for the Indian Navy.
Tapping into a 5,000 to 10,000 crore rupee defense market.
The scale and the sheer diversity of those end markets are remarkable. I mean, it's baffling.
It really is.
Managing 1,200 water installations, supplying naval propulsion gears that dictate the maneuverability of warships. How does a company that started out crushing sugarcane in 1932 become a dominant, mission-critical player in naval defense and municipal wastewater?
Right, because you can't just buy a naval gear factory off the shelf and expect to know how to run it.
Exactly.
It seems like a massive disconnected leap. But if you look really closely at their operational history, you can actually connect the dots.
Okay. Oh.
This isn't random diversification. It is a highly organic evolution of an internal engineering ecosystem.
Oh, wait, does it go back to the Bagas?
Yes. Think back to the power cogeneration we discussed earlier. To make their sugar mills financially viable decades ago, they had to build their own captive power plants to burn that waste bagasse.
So they were essentially their own first customer.
Precisely. And to do that efficiently, to squeeze the absolute maximum amount of electricity out of a pile of damp sugarcane fiber, they had to deeply understand the thermodynamics of steam turbines. And they had to master the complex physics of the gearboxes required to actually transmit that mechanical power to the generators.
Wow, okay. I see where this is going.
Over decades, the internal engineering teams building and maintaining the equipment for their own sugar mills became so exceptionally good at it, so precise, that management realized the engineering knowledge itself was a highly valuable, sellable product.
That is so smart.
Right. The mechanical skills required to optimize a bagasse power plant translated perfectly into deep, specialized expertise in high-speed gears and turbines for other industries.
So from there, stepping into like naval propulsion or massive industrial water pumps is really just applying that established core competency in fluid dynamics and mechanical transmission.
Exactly, to a new customer base.
That structural evolution makes perfect sense. The necessity of surviving the sugar business actually birthed the engineering business.
Exactly.
And now, that engineering business is riding its own set of massive macroeconomic tailwinds. We have to look at how government procurement policies are reshaping the landscape here.
Right. The defense mandates.
Specifically, initiatives like Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat, which roughly translates to self-reliant India.
And just looking at the economics of this impartially, these policies fundamentally alter the competitive dynamics for a domestic manufacturer like Triveni.
Because they prioritize local companies, right?
Yes. These mandates require a significant percentage of defense and critical infrastructure components to be sourced from domestic manufacturers, rather than imported from overseas.
And let's look at the mechanics of that. When you have a government mandate for local sourcing, it effectively erects a protective wall around 90% or more of that 5,000 to 10,000 crore defense TAM.
Right.
It hands that market almost exclusively to domestic players. It removes cheap foreign imports, which might otherwise win on pure price, from the competitive equation for those specific lucrative government contracts.
Which is huge for their margin.
It acts as a massive economic tailwind for Triveni's heavy engineering division, ensuring a really steady pipeline of orders.
And it provides them with the long-term revenue visibility needed to confidently invest in expanding their manufacturing capacity.
Right. So we've mapped out what they sell, the sheer scale of the markets they operate in, and the policies acting as tailwinds. But you and I both know that a company can sell complex naval gears and actual rivers of ethanol, but if the unit economics don't work...
Right, if the cash flow doesn't align.
Exactly, it's all just noise. So let's lift the hood on their financial engine.
The financials are where the true architecture of this conglomerate really becomes visible.
Yeah.
This is where you see how the different seemingly random parts actually protect each other.
Let's start with the revenue mix. Sugar and its allied businesses, meaning the distilleries, make up the lion's share, generating roughly 70 to 80% of total revenue.
Right.
The engineering side, despite its high profile and all those API standards, makes up the remaining 20 to 30%.
Okay.
But the numbers from the first half of the 2026 financial year, H1 FY26, they tell a very specific story about profitability.
They really do.
Consolidated revenue hit 3,304 crore rupees, which is a solid 18% increase.
Very respectable.
But here is the kicker. Profit before tax, or PBT, skyrocketed by 178% to 32 crore rupees, and profit after tax jumped 174% to 23.5 crore.
Those are staggering percentage increases relative to just an 18% top-line revenue growth.
Right. I mean, if you're wondering how an 18% revenue bump yields a massive 178% profit surge, it all comes down to a textbook case of operating leverage kicking into overdrive.
Yes.
With that massive capital expenditure behind them, the financial physics of the company fundamentally shift.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, operating leverage is really the key to understanding heavy industrial businesses.
Walk us through it.
Let's look at the mechanics of building a massive, state-of-the-art ethanol distillery like Rani Nangal. Triveni has these historical capital expenditure cycles of 500 to 1,000 crore rupees just to build these facilities.
That is a lot of cash out the door.
It is a massive, immovable, fixed cost. Whether you produce 1 drop of ethanol or 1,000,000 liters, the bank still demands the interest payment on the debt, right?
Right.
The accountants still have to record the depreciation on the steel tanks, and you still have to pay the core engineering staff to keep the plant operational. You have a very high baseline of costs before you make a single rupee of profit.
So you are digging a deep financial hole before you even turn the machines on.
You are. Now, as you start producing ethanol, your first batch, your second batch, your 100th batch, the revenue from those sales goes entirely toward just filling that hole.
Paying off those fixed costs.
Exactly. Your profit margins during this initial phase are practically zero. But, and this is the magic of operating leverage, once you hit the break-even point.
Once the metaphorical mortgage is paid for the month?
Exactly. The math flips violently in your favor. Because your fixed costs are already covered, every additional drop of ethanol you produce and sell costs very, very little to make.
Because you're only paying for the variable stuff now.
Right. You are only paying the variable cost of the raw maize, the water, and the enzymes. Therefore, almost the entire revenue from that extra drop of ethanol flows directly to the bottom line as pure profit.
So that 18% revenue growth we saw in H1 FY26 was essentially all volume occurring above their break-even point.
Yes, exactly.
Meaning every incremental sale converted to profit at an incredibly high rate.
Precisely. When you run a business with high fixed costs and you manage to successfully increase your volume, in this case driven by the new Rani Nangal multi-feed distillery operating highly efficiently on maize, your profit margins don't just inch up, they expand exponentially. We actually saw their EBITDA margins expand by 120 basis points just from that volume bump.
That perfectly explains the profit explosion. But there is another layer to the financial engine that is arguably more important for the day-to-day survival of the company.
Working capital.
Yes. It has to do with how cash actually moves through the business over a 12-month cycle. Let's look at the margin structure and the working capital. In peak harvest season, sugar gross margins are healthy, sitting around 20 to 30%. But in the off-season, when the mills are quiet, those margins compress violently down to 4 or 5%.
Right.
Engineering, however, has much higher structural gross margins of 25 to 35% year-round.
The margin disparity is important, but the real genius of the conglomerate structure is in the timing of the cash flows.
Right, they don't sync up.
No, they're complete opposites. The working capital cycles of these two businesses, agriculture and engineering, are entirely countercyclical.
Let's walk through the mechanics of that, starting with sugar. In the sugar business, you have a massive immediate working capital burden.
Huge.
During the 2 or 3 months of harvest, you are buying millions of tons of sugarcane. You have to pay the farmers, and usually you are mandated by the government to pay them within a very short window.
Right, the FRP rules.
Exactly. Millions of rupees are flowing out the door daily. But you can't sell all that processed sugar at once. The market would absolutely crash.
Right, you'd flood the market.
You have to process it, bag it, and hold it in these massive warehouses, selling it slowly over the next 9 to 12 months. That means your cash is literally tied up in physical melting inventory for 90 to 120 days.
It is incredibly cash intensive.
Yeah.
You basically act as a massive sponge, soaking up cash during the harvest and slowly wringing it out over the rest of the year.
Right.
If you only operated a sugar business, you would need massive, expensive short-term loans just to survive the harvest season.
Now compare that to the engineering segment. The working capital cycle there is entirely different.
Oh, completely.
When Triveni wins a contract to build a massive steam turbine for a refinery, or they take on a municipal wastewater project, they don't build the entire multi-million-dollar machine, ship it, and politely hope the client pays them at the end.
No, absolutely not.
They require large upfront cash advances, often 30 to 50% of the total project cost, before they even cut the first piece of steel. Their working capital cycle is much shorter, around 60 to 90 days, and it is largely funded by the customer's own cash.
And that right there is a beautifully constructed financial hedge.
Yeah.
The heavy, cash-draining nature of the seasonal sugar business is perfectly counterweighted by the cash-generative, advance-heavy nature of the engineering business.
Oh, wow.
The cash advances from the turbines actually help fund the massive sugar cane procurement. They use the liquidity of the high-tech business to smooth out the volatility of the agricultural business.
That is, with this brilliant cash flow machinery in place, you'd expect them to be untouchable.
You would think so.
The financials look fantastic right now, and the fortress looks incredibly strong. But when you really scrutinize how efficiently they actually deploy their capital over the long term, a massive crack appears in that fortress.
It really does. When we analyze their competitive positioning, despite their massive scale, their market leadership in gears, and their crucial role in ethanol blending, there is remarkably limited concrete evidence of sustainable, long-term competitive advantages.
The moats.
Right, the moats are weak.
The numbers here are actually a bit shocking for a company with such high market shares in specific niches. Let's look at the efficiency of their capital.
Okay.
Their return on capital employed, or ROCE, is a very modest 8.65%.
Which is not great.
And their return on equity, or ROE, is just 8.13%.
Yeah, that's practically savings account territory in some markets.
Right. Furthermore, their overall operating profit margin currently sits at 9%, which is significantly down from a historical peak of 18%.
Wow, cut in half.
And when we look at their consumer efforts, we see minimal evidence of brand power. They sell packaged products like shagun, brand sugar, along with packaged poha, maida, and flour, but there is no evidence that consumers are deeply loyal to these brands.
We're willing to pay a premium for them.
Exactly, no premium over generic alternatives.
This is where the harsh reality of their market position sets in. High market share does not automatically translate into high returns on capital.
But wait, if they control so much volume, second largest in sugar, second largest in ethanol, why can't they just flex their muscle and force a price increase?
Because they can't.
They have the scale. Why are the returns so mediocre? Are they actually bad at deploying capital, or is there a structural flaw in the business model?
It is entirely a structural flaw inherent to the industries they operate in. Being the second largest sugar producer or ethanol supplier means absolutely nothing if you cannot dictate the final price of the product.
Right.
They are the ultimate price takers. Think about it. The cost of their primary raw material, sugarcane, is dictated by the government via the FRP.
Okay.
The price of their ethanol is negotiated and set by government-backed oil marketing companies.
Right.
And the price of their bulk sugar is dictated by global commodities markets and local supply gluts.
Huh.
They cannot simply send a memo to the market deciding to raise the price of bulk sugar by 10% to improve their margins.
What happens if they do?
The market will simply laugh and buy from one of the other 500 mills.
So they are entirely trapped in a margin vice. They have a floor they can't lower and a ceiling they can't raise.
Exactly.
They are a volume player through and through. They make money by pushing massive amounts of product through the system as efficiently as possible, not by acting as a premium price dictator.
Exactly. And this lack of pricing power is the direct cause of those lower operating margins and the uninspiring ROCE.
Makes sense.
In fact, despite the massive recent profit surge driven by the new multi-feed distillery, financial analysts have actually downgraded their long-term earnings estimates.
Really? even with the profit surge.
Yeah, because the analysts foresee severe business headwinds in the broader commodity cycle that Triveni simply cannot control.
Which suddenly makes that urgent, highly risky pivot into super premium IMFL liquor make total
It
sense.
really does, right?
They are desperate to build a brand moat. They want to create a product where they can finally dictate the price based on perception and quality. They want a product where the consumer happily pays for the label and the lifestyle, not just the raw cost of the fermented liquid inside.
They recognize that relying solely on volume in a commoditized, highly regulated market is a treadmill you can never step off of.
Yeah.
You have to run faster every year just to stand still. They desperately need higher margin, brand-driven products to fundamentally elevate that 8% return on equity into something that attracts serious long-term investors.
But building a brand takes years, and right now they are still heavily exposed to those commodity cycles.
Very exposed.
So if the moat is weak, what are the barbarians at the gate? What are the specific mechanisms that could actually bring this 90-year-old conglomerate to its knees? Let's dive into the bear case and the key risks.
Every company has vulnerabilities, but Triveni's are quite distinct. They are tied directly to the very policies and raw materials driving their current success.
Let's start with the most glaring one, regulatory risk.
Oh, yeah.
The entire narrative of their recent growth, the massive investments in the Rani Nangal multi-feed distillery, all of it is predicated on the government's mandate to reach 20% ethanol blending. But what if there is a sudden policy shift? Imagine a scenario where inflation spikes, food security becomes a massive political issue during an election year, and the government decides to cut the ethanol subventions, the subsidies.
Or they just stall the blending mandate at 15% to ensure enough grain stays in the food supply.
Exactly.
This raises an important question, because the mechanical failure cascade of that scenario would be brutal for Triveni.
How so?
Well, if the blending mandate stalls, the demand for ethanol drops instantly. Now remember that massive operating leverage we discussed earlier.
The 500 to 1,000 crore rupee fixed costs.
Right. The money used to build those distilleries, well, operating leverage cuts both ways. It is a double-edged sword.
Oh, no.
If demand suddenly vanishes because of policy changes, you are left with massive idle capacity. You still have to pay the interest on the debt used to build the plant. You
Right.
still have to record the depreciation. But the revenue have evaporated. Margins wouldn't just compress, they would be absolutely crushed under the weight of those fixed costs.
Then you have input cost volatility. We talked about how smart the multi-feed distillery is, allowing them to pivot to maize.
Yes.
But what happens if there are sharp, unexpected rises in maize prices or sugarcane prices? We are dealing with agriculture. Severe droughts or supply chain shocks happen all the time.
And their recent distillery turnaround relies heavily on the economics of maize right now.
Right.
So if a bad harvest causes maize prices to double, their margins erode instantly.
Yeah.
Because they are a price taker on the ethanol side, they cannot just pass that increased raw material cost onto the oil companies.
They just have to eat the loss.
Exactly.
And this brings us to the balance sheet, which adds a layer of tension to all these operational risks. Triveni is carrying a gross debt of 753 crore rupees.
Which is not an insignificant number.
No.
Yeah.
Now, to their credit, their treasury management has been excellent. They have managed the cost of those funds down to a very respectable 6.4%.
Right.
But when you look at their liquidity, their near-term liabilities, which are sitting at 9.64 billion rupees, currently outweigh their immediate cash and receivables on hand.
The debt load is significant. And we also can't ignore the technological and geopolitical risks facing the engineering side of the house.
Right, the turbines and gears.
The power transmission and turbine business is highly profitable, but it faces intense, constant pressure from low-cost Chinese imports.
Oh, of course.
If trade barriers shift, Chinese manufacturers can severely undercut them on price, which would quickly erode those 30% margins.
Wow.
Furthermore, the entire global industrial complex is shifting toward green technology and renewable energy systems. This could potentially outpace the demand for Triveni's traditional steam turbine offerings.
But if you look at their R&D spend, it's sitting below 3% of revenue.
Yeah, that's concerning.
For a company building naval propulsion systems and industrial turbines in an era where everyone is pivoting to advanced green tech, that feels incredibly exposed. How do they justify that lack of forward-looking investment? Are they just, milking the legacy cash cow?
It's a glaring vulnerability, especially when you consider the competitive landscape. A sub 3% R&D spend suggests they're mostly relying on iterative improvements to existing designs rather than pioneering next-generation technology.
Right.
If a competitor develops a radically more efficient, non-steam-based propulsion or power recovery system, Triveni could find their flagship engineering products rendered completely obsolete.
When you lay it out step by step like that, the picture gets a bit harrowing.
It does.
I just want to visualize this structural trap for a second. They have a 753 crore debt hanging over them. Their immediate liabilities outweigh the cash they have on hand to pay them. Their R&D spend is minimal, and their primary growth engine is entirely dependent on government subsidies and blending mandates. If the government suddenly changes its mind on ethanol, or if a drought wipes out the maize crop, doesn't this whole house of cards get very wobbly very fast?
Yeah.
How close to the edge are they actually walking?
It looks precarious, and the operational risks are very real, but and this is important, we have to contextualize the balance sheet risk.
Okay, contextualize.
Yes, their net debt is 6.51 billion rupees. However, the company's total market capitalization is roughly 78.5 billion rupees.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That market cap offers a very strong, massive equity buffer. They're not on the brink of insolvency. They have access to capital markets if they need liquidity to survive a shock.
That's a fair distinction. The market values the whole enterprise highly enough to absorb some blows.
Exactly. But your core point about the structural vice is absolutely valid. The ultimate risk for Triveni is being caught in a macroeconomic trap.
Right.
They are currently thriving, in large part because of government subventions, including roughly 160 crore rupees in highly subsidized loans for their ethanol expansion. If those supports are pulled, they will find themselves trapped between massive, inflexible fixed capital expenses and highly variable, unhedged commodity inputs. Navigating that requires incredibly deft, forward-looking management.
Which perfectly brings us to the final piece of this puzzle, management and capital allocation.
Right. Who's driving the bus?
Exactly. Facing these intense cyclical risks, regulatory dependencies, and technological shifts requires serious, visionary leadership. Who is actually steering this ship, and what is their master plan for navigating the next decade?
So the company is led by its promoters, which is a family deeply entrenched in the business and its history.
Okay.
You have Dhruv M. Sawhney, the chairman and managing director, who's 81 years old and has an astonishing 33-year tenure at the helm.
33 years.
Working alongside him is Tarun Sawhney, the vice chairman and managing director, with a 17-year tenure. This is a leadership team with deep, multi-decade institutional memory. They have navigated commodity crashes, government changes, and technological shifts before.
And they have certainly not been resting on their laurels recently.
No, not at all.
They've made some incredibly bold, transformative moves. In 2024, they acquired a 61.77% stake in Sirshadi Lal Enterprises Limited, or SSEL, for 80 crore rupees.
Right.
They also announced a massive 1,000 crore rupee investment plan for expansion alongside their Q2 FY26 results. And perhaps the most shocking move of all, given the history of the company, the pending demerger of the power transmission business into a completely separate, publicly traded entity called Triveni Power Transmission.
These moves give us a very clear window into their strategic thinking and how they view the future architecture of the business.
I really want to focus on this demerger because mechanically it feels totally counterintuitive based on everything we've talked about for the last hour.
It does seem strange at first.
Right. We've discussed how they spent decades building this perfectly balanced conglomerate. We talked about how the cash-rich, steady, high-margin gears business beautifully balances out the highly volatile, cash-draining, low-margin sugar business.
Right, the financial fortress.
It operates as a financial fortress, protecting the core. Why take a sledgehammer to the fortress and split the power transmission business off now? What changes in the math to make that a good idea?
It is a phenomenal question. And it really comes down to the concept of unlocking shareholder value and dealing with the realities of modern capital markets.
Okay.
Because while that internal cash flow balance is fantastic for the company's internal treasury management, allowing them to fund their own operations, it is incredibly frustrating for external investors.
Why is that? If the company's stable, shouldn't investors love it?
Think of it like a cable television bundle.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine you are an institutional investor, like a massive mutual fund or a pension fund, and your specific mandate is to invest in high-margin, pure-play engineering and defense companies.
Right.
You look at Triveni's incredible naval defense and turbine business, the API standards, the 30% margins, and you want to buy it.
Makes sense.
But under the current conglomerate structure, you can't just buy the engineering business. To get the engineering piece, you are forced to also buy massive exposure to unpredictable sugarcane harvests, monsoon risks, ethanol blending politics, and agricultural debt.
Oh, I see.
A lot of institutional investors simply won't do it. The risk profile of the agricultural side pollutes the appeal of the engineering side. This creates what is known in finance as a conglomerate discount, where the combined company is valued by the stock market at significantly less than the sum of its individual parts.
Ah, so by demerging the company, you are essentially unbundling the cable package.
Exactly.
You allow investors to buy exactly what they want. The specialized engineering industries can buy shares in the new pure-play Triveni power transmission stock, driving up its valuation based on its high margins.
Yes.
And the agricultural commodity or green energy investors can just buy the core sugar and ethanol stock.
Exactly. It removes the investment friction. It allows the market to properly value the high-margin engineering division on its own merits without the drag of agricultural cyclicality.
Wow.
And mechanically, existing shareholders will just receive shares in both companies. It is a very sophisticated capital allocation move designed to maximize the total market capitalization of the family's assets.
And what about the SSEL acquisition? Spending 80 crore rupees to buy a 61% stake in another sugar enterprise. If they're trying to modernize, why buy more legacy sugar assets?
That is a pure geographical synergy play.
How so?
SSEL operates sugar units in Uttar Pradesh, right in Triveni's existing backyard. In the sugar business, geography is destiny.
Right, transportation costs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sugarcane is heavy, and it begins to lose its sucrose content the literal moment it is cut. You cannot transport it long distances efficiently.
Ah.
By acquiring a neighboring mill, management is heavily focused on deep operational integration. They are consolidating their logistical footprint and expanding their direct, captive ecosystem of farmers.
So it's about control.
Yes. It allows them to optimize truck routes, prevent competitors from poaching their cane supply, and ensure a steady, massive flow of raw material to feed their new, thirsty, multi-feed ethanol distilleries. It is all about locking down the local supply chain.
It sounds like they have a very tight, ruthless grip on the operational mechanics of both businesses.
They do, though there is one modern area where the source material shows a distinct, perhaps troubling gap for a legacy company of this size.
That's sad.
There is a noticeable lack of explicit ESG-linked pay environmental, social, and governance metrics, or long-term value creation incentives tied into their executive compensation structures.
How does that impact them practically?
Well, in today's corporate governance landscape, especially for a company dealing so heavily in massive municipal water treatment projects and resource-intensive agriculture, institutional investors increasingly want to see executive bonuses directly tied to sustainability metrics.
Like emissions and water usage.
Right. Emissions reductions, water stewardship, not just pure quarterly profit or volume throughput. It's an area where their corporate governance structure may need to seriously modernize to attract that next tier of global investment.
As we wrap up this deep dive, let's pull all of these complex threads together.
Yeah, let's summarize.
We started by looking at Triveni Engineering Industries as this baffling paradox, a company that relies on the monsoon rains to grow sugarcane, but also manufactures hyper-precise API-compliant gears for naval warships.
And what we found by looking under the hood is that it isn't a paradox at all. It's a meticulously crafted ecosystem of industrial survival.
For you, the listener, Triveni is the ultimate case study in how legacy businesses, nearly a century old, managed to survive and thrive through multiple eras of economic history.
They adapt.
Right. They don't do it by stubbornly doing the exact same thing forever. They do it by constantly, ruthlessly adapting their physical infrastructure and their engineering knowledge to match new macroeconomic trends. When raw sugar margins collapse, they didn't just accept the losses. They used the waste bagasse to build a captive power company. When the internal engineering knowledge from that power company became elite, they productized it and sold turbines to the Navy.
Right.
And now, as national fuel demands shift toward energy independence, they are pivoting from a simple sugar mill into a massive multi-feed maize ethanol energy player and experimenting with super premium liquor.
It is the absolute embodiment of industrial evolution. They use the cash from the past to engineer the future. But as we close this analysis, I want to leave you with a final thread to pull, something that expands beyond just the corporate balance sheet, the API standards, and the working capital cycles.
Okay, what is it?
As Triveni shifts its giant new 200 KLPD distillery toward using maize to produce fuel-grade ethanol, it positions itself squarely at the intersection of a massive, profound, global dilemma.
The food versus fuel debate.
Exactly. What happens to the economics and, more importantly, the ethics of a business and a broader society when the raw agricultural materials needed to feed a rapidly growing population are increasingly diverted to fuel the nation's vehicles?
Right.
Maize is a staple food. It is vital animal feed. When the government mandates 20% blending and companies like Triveni build massive, highly efficient infrastructure to consume that maize purely for combustible fuel, it inevitably impacts local food prices and agricultural supply chains.
It's a huge trade-off.
It is a profound debate about resource allocation. Are we prioritizing the cost of a liter of petrol over the cost of a kilogram of grain? And this debate is playing out right now, not in a theoretical economics classroom, but on the very real, dusty factory floors and farmlands of Uttar Pradesh.
It really makes you pause and reconsider the entire supply chain of modern life. Think about that massive industrial machine, a company perfectly balancing the unpredictable rains of India with the microscopic precision of a navel gear, now consuming the very crops we rely on to eat, all to power the cars we drive to work. Keep that image and the complex engineering behind it in your mind the next time you pull up to the pump to fill up your tank.